This is Mrs.S.Pravallika, Assistant Professor, Department of AML, Aditya University. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss regarding solid principles. So let us start with the today's session. At the end of this lecture, student will be able to explain about the solid principles. So firstly, what is meant by a solid principle? So the solid principles are the 5 essential guidelines that enhances software design, making code more maintainable and scalable. So simply, the solid principles are the 5 essential guidelines which enhances the software design, making the code more maintainable and scalable. So it helps in easy maintenance and as scalability of code. Next, the solid principles helps in enhancing loose coupling. So what is meant by a loose coupling? Loose coupling means a group of classes are less dependent on one another. So in simple, a loose coupling indicates a group of classes less dependent on one another. So loose coupling helps in making code more reusable, maintainable, flexible and stable. So as we have already learned, so loose coupling is nothing but a less dependence of classes on one another. So as we are having no dependence, as we are having our less dependence, so this helps us to have a code in a more reusable way as well as in a maintainable way, flexible and as well as a stable way. So loose coupling classes minimize changes in your code when some changes are required in some other code. So as we are using with this loose coupled classes, so this minimizes the changes in the code, or else when the change is required in some other code and in the loosely coupled classes, the change will be in a very less number. So this is regarding the intro part of solid principles which completely works on loose coupling. So let us move to the next one. Solid principles. So the name itself says S-O-L-I-D. So S indicates single responsibility, O indicates open close principle, L indicates Lisco substitution principle, I indicates interface segregation principle, D indicates dependency inversion principle. So completely these 5 principles are simply stated as SOLID, solid principles. So let us start in detail session about these solid principles. So first one, single responsibility principle. So what is meant by a single responsibility principle? The name itself states as single responsibility. So that means only one responsibility should be taken out. So this principle states that a class should have only one reason to change. So what is the single responsibility principle states? So simply it states that a class should have only one reason to change. So if we are just taking a class, it should be having only one particular reason to change, which means every class should have a single responsibility or else a single job or else a single purpose. So that means every class. So if we are just going with a programming language, so that can be of C, C++, Java, Python or whatever it might be. When we are taking a programming language, in that programming language, if we are just going with a class, so that class should have only a single job or else a single responsibility to be done. So in other words, a class should have only one job or purpose within the software system. So when coming in terms of software system also, a class should have only one job. So how can we state this in an example? So let us say an example. Imagine a baker who is responsible for baking bread. So the baker's role is to focus on the task of baking bread, ensuring that the bread is of high quality, properly baked and meets the bakery standards. So what was the example stated here? So for example, if we are visiting a bakery, so what is the role of a baker? So his responsibility is to make a bread baking. So that should be done with the highest quality, that should be done with the proper baking, and as well as it needs to meet the bakery standards. So that means he is having one single responsibility, that is to bake the bread in a proper way. So this is what stated in an example. So that means if we are just taking an example of a baker, he is having a responsibility of baking the bread. So that means his single responsibility is to bake the bread with high quality, properly baking as well as meeting the bakery standards. So what if he is having multiple responsibilities? So if the baker handles inventory, ordering, customer service, cleaning along with the baking, it violates single responsibility principle since multiple responsibilities are combined. So what if the baker is the only person who is handling each and every responsibility in the bakery? So then we can't say that he is having a single responsibility over there. So he is the one who is looking after the inventory, He is the one who is looking of the ordering. He is the one looking at the customer service. He is the one who is cleaning along with the baking. So if he is doing the multitasking, so we can't say he is having a single responsibility. But what was the principle of single responsibility? Every class should have only a single job, or else every class should be having only one specific task to be completed. So we can't say if all these actions are performed by single person, then we can't say it is a single responsibility. So each task is a separate responsibility, and combining them reduces the baker's focus and effectiveness in baking. So what happens if he is focusing on all these things at once? So he can't focus on completely on baking, so that we can't achieve a proper quality of bread. So definitely when we are just working on the multiple tasks, or else when we are trying to combine all the tasks, then we can't get an effective bread. So the baker's responsibility is to have a single job so that he can do his job in a correct way. So to follow SRP, SRP indicates single responsibility principle. Responsibilities should be divided among different individuals or teams, each handling a specific task independently. So in order to follow single responsibility, what should be done? Responsibility should be divided among different individuals. So for example, the baker's role is to bake the bread. Again, we need to have one more team who is looking after the inventory. We need to have one more team, or else one more member who is looking after the ordering. At the same time, we need to have one more person who is looking after the cleaning. So that means if we are dividing one specific task to one person, then each task will be handled by that person independently. So rather than depending or combining a single person on multiple tasks, we can have a single person with a single job, so that we can have our task done completely. So this is the rule in single responsibility principle. Responsibility should be divided among different individuals or teams, each handling a specific task independently. So this is regarding the single responsibility principle. So where a class should have only one reason to change. So in the solid principles, we have discussed with the first one, S, single responsibility principle. So let us move to the next one, open closed principle. So which states with the open closed principle. So let us see the next one, open closed principle. So what is this open closed principle states? This principle states that software entities, so software entities in the sense the classes, modules, functions, etc., all these will be coming under the software entities, should be open for extension but closed for modification. So what it states here? So that means the software entities like classes, modules, functions should be open for extension but closed for modification. So that means we can welcome the new features, but we can't modify the existing ones. So that means it should be open for extension, but it should be closed for modification. So adding the new feature should not reflect the modifications, or it should not reflect the existing features. So which means you should be able to extend a class behavior without modifying it. So that means we can add something, or else we are able to add something without modifying the existing one. So this is what open close principle states. So here we are having an example. So let us discuss the example. Imagine you have a class called payment processor that processes the payments for an online store. Initially, the payment processor class only supports the processing payments using credit cards. However, you want to extend its functionality to also support processing payments using PayPal. So here we are having an example which is stating that we are having an online payment processor. So we are having one class, so that is payment processor, which is doing the payments supporting the credit cards. And what it was saying now, so as we are accepting the payments from the credit cards, now we need to extend the functionality to support the payments by PayPal as well. So that means existing payments are done by the credit cards, and now we want the functionality to be supported by PayPal as well. So we are going to add an extension of PayPal payments, but we are not modifying the payments which were doing by the credit cards. So we can extend the class behavior but without modifying the existing behavior. So this is what an open close principle states. Imagine you have a class called payment processor that processes the payments for an online store. Initially, the payment processor class only supports the payments using credit cards. However, now its functionality is extended to support using PayPal. So this is what we are discussing in the open close principle. So that means we can extend the class behavior without modifying the existing behavior. So initially the payments were done by the credit cards. Now we are also extending this functionality to support using PayPal. So let us see in detail explanation here. Instead of modifying the existing payment processor class, PayPal payment processor class can be created to add PayPal support. So this is what we are discussing. So initially we are having one class, so that is the payments by credit cards. So now we are extending the behavior accepting the payments by using PayPal as well. So this keeps the original class unchanged while extending its functionality through the new class. So that means the original class, whatever existing so far, is not going to change, or else we are not going to modify that. And instead of it, what are we doing? We are extending its functionality through a new class. So it follows open close principle by keeping a class closed for modification but open for extension. So this is what we are discussing. So that means we can extend the class by adding new features, but we are keeping it closed for modification. So this is what happens in the open closed principle. So this was the second principle in solid principles. So at the end of this lecture, the student will be able to explain about the solid principles. Thank you.